Okay. So a few quick announcements, mainly upcoming presenters. So in October, we are having a presentation by, I forget what his last name is, but his first name is Arnie. And he is going to be doing a presentation on Hawaii. So that is the next presenter that we have coming up this year. Then we have mini comps, which this month is wide angle. So we already have those submitted, and I've got our voting set up for that afterwards. And even though you have to be a member to submit, everyone is more than welcome to vote. So if you're not a member and you're on the meeting, feel free to stick around for the voting as well. In October, our mini comp theme is night dive because scary Halloween. And November, we're actually kind of continuing with a theme and we're doing shadows. So those are the remainder of the mini comp themes for the year. And I think that also sums up the announcements that I have for tonight. So with that, I will want to welcome Theresa, who is one of Paul's good friends and dive buddies that have been on multiple trips together and all that. So she will be doing a presentation on the Philippines, as you see here. So with that, welcome, Theresa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I have to thank Paul too for inviting me. I'm going to put it, there we go. Can you see it in presentation mode now?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes. Okay. As I mentioned, Paul asked me to speak about sharks, but I felt that I had done that before. So I put a new presentation together on the Philippines because I just returned back from what is my third trip to the Philippines, and I'll probably go back because I really love to go there so much. And what strikes me, I think, about the Philippines is the wide diversity. I mean, I've only touched the tip of the iceberg in the Philippines, and I've seen so much in 3 trips. I'll be showing some images from Anilao, and that's where I learned how to do macro photography ways back, as well as Dumaguete, Apo Island, and Tubataha, which was the latest trip. This shows, I think, the wide range of diversity that you can get in the Philippines, but it's not even, it doesn't even really give you all of the flavor of the Philippines, because there's apparently there is a lot more interesting diving there that I haven't done yet, which we'll touch on a little bit during the presentation. So feel free to unmute and ask questions along the way, or I left plenty of time at the end for questions as well. This is a juvenile wonder puss that was taken on a blackwater dive in Anilao at Anilao Pier. On the left-hand side, on the right-hand side is a whale shark from Tubataha. It's kind of a young whale shark, not a big one, but a whale shark nonetheless. I thought I'd give you a little bit of history about my underwater photography. It started when I started diving, which was in 2006. And I really started to do photography to show my friends what I saw underwater and document things and learn, look things up and read about things. This was my first open water dive in the ocean in Kona, Hawaii. And during that trip, I just fell in love with the ocean and fell in love with diving. And this was with a little point and shoot camera, sea life camera. A beautiful scene, but I think my camera skills and camera really didn't do it justice. But I kept practicing and diving, and I worked on becoming an underwater photographer. I've studied along with Paul underwater photography with Alex Mustard, and I've done many, many workshops with Alex. This is Alex's first book that he autographed for me a long time ago. And I was recently in the Philippines with him. I learn something every time I'm with Alex's group. And I've met many people like Paul and a lot of my dive buddies on these trips. I'm still kind of using older technology. I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark IV mostly, and I'm probably be switching to mirrorless sometime in the near future. But for now, this has been good for me for the past 5 or 6 years. I have a Subal housing, which when I switch my new, and I've had Nauticam in the past as well. When I eventually get a new system, I probably won't go with Subal again. I have Icolite strobes as well as retro strobes, and I shoot a lot of wide angle with the wide angle conversion port. And that's shown here, that's in the Red Sea, where I have my rig with my wide angle conversion port. My friend and dive buddy Nick Moore is holding it because it's quite heavy. But it's a really wonderful piece of gear to use underwater. Some of the images I took in Tubataha were from using this setup. I've had to, I was ill in the past year. I had 5 surgeries because I had breast cancer, and then I had shoulder surgery. And so I've had to downsize my equipment, and I'm working on that. Although I still have been able to do a couple of dive trips in between surgeries, but surgeries are over and diving is going to go ahead full steam now. In the Philippines, these were my dive buddies. We were called the Dancing Dive Divas. In Anilao, we were on the same boat, and on the liveaboard, in Tuataha, we were on a liveaboard, the MV Solitude, and every time we would get ready, they would play music and we would all dance while we were putting on our wetsuits. So we got called the Dancing Dive Divas. And we always wore pink because of our commitment to dive into the pink, which we'll talk about at the end of the presentation. It's one of the groups that I work with to support breast cancer research. We had Kathy Holmes is there, Stephanie Doninger, Valerie Reed, and Lena Roy. I've been diving with for many years, and they're great friends. The Philippines is quite a diverse place to dive. There are over 7,000 islands. The water is clear. There's a wide diversity of coral, fish. There are many healthy reefs. In the island itself, it's most of the places that everyone speaks English. They have 11 different dialects. It's the only Catholic island in Asia, a Catholic country in Asia, I learned. But several areas of the Philippines are known for certain types of diving. So there's Apo Island and Apo Reef, Tubataha, which are well known for pelagics like whale sharks, and there is wall diving in another area of the Philippines, Pescador Island, which I haven't been to. Malapascua is famous for thresher sharks, and I don't know if anyone here in this meeting has had the pleasure of going there, but it's one of the things on my bucket list still, so I still have to go back to the Philippines. There are beautiful reefs in other areas, and there is an interesting area which has a fair number of World War II wrecks, which lie in fairly shallow water, and that's another area of interest that I would like to do at some point. So I'll be showing you some slide images from Anilao, Dumaguete, and Tubataha mainly, and some from Apo Island. So I started in 2014 was my first trip to the Philippines, and I it was a large photo workshop with Rephoto and Alex Mustard, and a lot of different photography teachers were there. It was really fun, and I spent almost 2 weeks learning macro photography, and my hands were sore from holding my camera and pressing the shutter. I even had blisters from taking so many photographs. But I think it's where I was really got a good handle on macro photography. This is one of the images from that trip, which surprisingly won second place in Underwater Photographer of the Year for macro, international macro. And it was a simple image of some dancing shrimp, which were on a red pink sponge. And recently, on this last trip, I went back to the same site, and this particular sponge is not there any longer. When we were diving at that site, the guides couldn't understand why I was intrigued by this sponge, which was on a cement block. And these shrimp, because they're common shrimp, they kept trying to pull me away to take pictures of very tiny things that they would find. And I spent about 30 minutes with this block of pink sponge and these shrimp, and they were doing all different formations, which really intrigued me. So it was the guides didn't think there was really anything interesting about it, but I'm drawn to color when I do underwater photography. So anything with color and interesting, like color background, interesting subjects really draws my attention. In Anilau, they have, we stayed at INR Resort, but there are several good resorts in Anilau. Crystal Blue is really famous for blackwater diving, as well as the, I think, Anilau Photo Academy. It's become quite a place for blackwater photography and blackwater diving, which I'll show some images from in a little bit. But it's quite an easy place to dive because we had 4 people on our boat and we had 2 guides. So there was a ratio of 1 guide to 2 divers. They were great at finding subjects for us, and they always kept us busy. And in between dives, sometimes they would take us to the Philippine 7-Eleven and Anilau Pier to get snacks, Philippine snacks. So it was a lot of fun. There in Anilau, there are your typical nudibranchs, which are quite beautiful, and they're all over the place. I didn't even need guides to find these. The one in the upper left is actually mating, and this one is pretty specific to Anilau. The one in the lower left or lower right-hand corner, the upper left is the mating one, the lower right was the highlight of the dive for the dive guide, was a nudibranch that they have never seen in Anilau before, and it's a very unusual one, and they kept taking us back to see it many times. So it's a very strange, it looks like a lump of string, and it's really hard to orient yourself to see where the rhinophores are, but it was a quite interesting type of nudibranch to see, but there are so many everywhere that you just get a little bit overwhelmed. But I am just really drawn to their color, and I think they're very beautiful photographic subjects. There are plenty of gobies, and there are pink-eyed gobies, which are on the right hand, which kind of hang out on pieces of tops of coral. They can be really skittish, but they can also be very, they can just sit and watch you, and they're quite beautiful. And the left-hand panel here are the lemon gobies, and there are quite a few areas where lemon gobies live in discarded bottles. And they're very interested in watching you. So you can stay in front of their home for a while and watch them. Eventually they come out and check you out. I don't have an image of this, but one of these guys came out and spit sand at me. So they weren't very pleased that I was like sitting outside their front door, but they're just the cutest things, and they're so bright and yellow that I just love to see them in any site. We've seen them a lot in Indonesia as well, but there were quite a few in the Philippines, in Anilao especially. These are kind of some of the typical shrimp that you might see, the skeleton shrimp on the left with the babies sticking out. They're so hard to photograph, and I would get a headache every time I tried to focus on them and try to get at least something in focus. You can see the babies kind of hanging off here from the adult. And then this is a glass shrimp that has eggs, and they'd be hopping around. You barely notice them until you start to focus on them, and then you see them everywhere. The same with the skeleton shrimp. But these tend to live on blades of grass, and they can also be on other, like I found one on a seahorse. But they're almost invisible and hard to photograph. These are some other shrimp, the emperor shrimp, which typically are on the sea cucumber or can be under a sea cucumber. They're quite beautiful as well. They can also plant themselves on a big nudibranch. On the right-hand side is a hairy squat lobster, which is quite colorful and was in this little crevice, so it was really kind of difficult to shoot to get the whole thing. But really beautiful to see these creatures out. One of the really fun times that we had were playing with the octopus, coconut octopus, that there were several sites, and this was in Anilao Pier. So we would routinely do a night dive in Anilao Pier every evening, or a blackwater dive on Anilao Pier. And there were a lot of octopus, and they have little homes, and this one had a home in this bright yellow orange jar of whatever it was. But the sequence of photographs here show, here's when I first started observing the octopus. It was here it had its little shell home. That's its front door. And it would come out here. It comes out to explore while you're watching it. It comes out to explore, but then it returns back to its home, right into the can. And then when it's tired of you, it closes the door with its shell. So it's really just fun to watch them. There were so many times I didn't even take pictures because they were just so much fun. In other times in Indonesia, when I've interacted with them, we could take shells down, and we'd put them out, and they would come and collect the shells and make little homes from them. There's also a little friend. If you look on the image on the lower right hand, this octopus has a little friend at the entrance to its house right here. This I think it's either a snail but it was kind of hanging out there with the octopus. But they just have so much personality, and they're so much fun to watch and photograph. They're so intelligent, and they have such amazing behavior. We saw several flamboyant cuttlefish on the left. And this fish, which I never saw before, they called a comet fish. And this is actually a fairly large sized fish, but it hides under a ledge. And it's totally covered with white spots, and it has a little heart here and a yellow area, and I think it's the dorsal fin. But it's quite a beautiful fish, quite a skittish one. But it was the first time I've seen anything like this. And I'm not usually a huge fan of crinoids because they can just stick to you and you can't get them off of your wetsuit. But the crinoids had such amazing colors in the Philippines that I just really enjoyed playing around with them, doing photographs that were kind of close up or super macro shots to see if I could create some unique colors and images. But these were just playing around with things when we couldn't find anything or there was just some downtime underwater. We have a beautiful little seahorse that was modeling for me here. And the guides got very excited because they found this little guy on the lower right-hand corner during a night dive at the NLL Pier, and the guides had only seen one of these in the past before, and it's a cat coral shark, which is quite a small shark, maybe about 12 inches long, and it just kind of sits in the sand and watches you. But it's really a beautiful little shark. And that was the first one for me as well. NLL Pier is just an amazing place to dive at night, especially there's so many different creatures that we've seen. And I've spent, this last trip, we spent quite a bit of time at the pier during night dives. And generally we would do from 3 to 4 dives a day. Excuse me. When 2 in the morning, and then 2 in the afternoon, or we would do 1 in the afternoon and do a night dive or a blackwater dive, usually at the NLL Pier. And we had our typical frogfish. This frogfish was quite large. It was on the Crystal Blue Resort Reef, which is a lovely, beautiful reef for nudibranchs, for frogfish, for all different colors of shrimp. It's quite a nice area, and I think if I go back to Anilao, I might stay at the Crystal Blue Resort. The food I think is much better than at the Iona Resort where we stayed, and it's a little smaller, but very colorful frogfish, and of course pygmy seahorses. This pygmy seahorse was at about 90 feet, so we didn't spend much time with it, but it was a very patient pygmy seahorse. And I'd like to, when I shoot pygmy seahorses, I like to get the bigger picture of the sea fan and the things in the sea fan, like this. You can see the little brittle star there, and it was quite a pretty pygmy. This is, I believe, a Bargabanti pygmy seahorse. This time in Anilao, I did my first blackwater dives. I've never done blackwater diving before, and I'm not sure if any of you have done much of that, but they drop a line and put lights down this line, and the boat kind of drifts, and you kind of stay around the line where the lights are, but you can see these very small, tiny things that when you photograph them turn out to be juvenile things of things that you might recognize as an adult. And it's quite interesting. I think if you weren't doing photography, it might not be so interesting because it's hard to see these little things when you're diving, and if you're not careful, you have to watch your depth pretty regularly because you can go up and down following things. And I can usually tell by my ears if I'm up and down 10 feet difference. I can tell if my ears are bugging me. So I tried to stick to a constant depth, but on the left is a really beautiful jellyfish, and on the right is our wonderpuss, juvenile wonderpuss, and the guides went crazy over this thing because they had just started to see the juvenile wonderpuss there in Anilao. They hadn't seen them before on blackwater dives, but they're really pretty. beautiful. And when you see, they're almost transparent when you're taking pictures of them. And then when you can edit your photos and see all the details in those, it's just really amazing what you see. These are more images from the Blackwater dive. We had a juvenile ornate ghost pipefish, which was quite pretty. I love ghost pipefish, and especially the ornate ones. They're so gorgeous with the color. And on the lower right-hand image is a mantis shrimp, a juvenile mantis shrimp. You can see by the eyes, which are quite large. And on the left lower panel is a soapfish. And it's unfortunately a little bit of a sad story with this soapfish, because we were watching it and taking pictures of it, and then all of a sudden a big fish came and ate it right in front of us. So we lost the little soapfish, unfortunately. It was quite pretty. It had a very long trail in the dorsal fin. There were also lots of squid in Anilau Pier and on the Blackwater Dive, and they were quite interested in us, and colorful, really beautiful creatures. And the guides were great. I think if I didn't have the guides finding a lot of these and lighting them for me, I think my images wouldn't look as nice as they do. And this is a blue ring octopus that just, I think we're done with Anilau. So I think Anilau was finished with the Blackwater diving. But there's so much macro stuff at Anilau. It's just amazing. And Dumaquete is a plane ride from Anilau. Been to Dumaquete twice as well, once as a single trip and once as a trip along with Anilau. I wasn't in Dumaquete this particular time, but I've stayed at the Atlantis Resort, which is, I think, Marty Snyderman has been running photo workshops there recently. And there's just an amazing amount of macro life at Dumaquete as well. They have a fairly high, it depends on when you go. There is a season for blue ring and blue ring related octopus, like Metodi octopus. And this blue ring just popped up right in front of us. And it was just really a beautiful little guy that you can see the blue rings. There were different colored seahorses in Dumaquete. This is a beautiful yellow one that was kind of on this almost a green sand background, which was quite colorful. And of course, the ornate ghost pipefish. Here, the black or the white. And then this is another pipefish, but it's has eggs, pink little eggs in its belly, you can see. And this is a pair of different colored ornate ghost pipefish. And I could just watch, sometimes they drive you crazy when you're trying to photograph them and there's more than one, and you're trying to get them lined up so they'll both be in focus on one side, and it can take a long time just waiting for them to move into the right position. But they're quite, I think, quite beautiful fish, and I love to shoot them. We've found a variety of frogfish in Dumaquete. There's a couple of hairy frogfish. One is more striped in the upper right hand panel, and the lower was a very hairy frogfish. And there were a lot of painted different colored frogfish, like the one in the lower left, which is orange and red. The white one was quite striking, a very nice pose for me. They just have such beautiful colors and textures with the different types of frogfish that they're just really fun to shoot. And I didn't do any, I've done a lot more with different types of lighting with the frogfish in Lembe, for example, different colors and backlighting or snooting. But here I just was shooting just regular, front lighting and flash. But I think any way you shoot them, they're just really beautiful and so charismatic with their unique faces. One of my favorite things to follow there were the little catfish, these tiny juvenile catfish that they're like a ball that swarms around on the in the sand, and they feed. You can see their little whiskers there. They and I just love to watch them and photograph them. They're so tiny and energetic, and I love their different formations. When you're in Dumaguete, you can take a day trip to Apo Island, and I've only been to Apo Island once when I was in Dumaguete, and they're pretty well known for whale sharks. Whale sharks feed there every day, but the day that we went, we didn't go to the whale sharks. We went to the island, and what I remember most about Apo Island, it just has so many turtles everywhere you go. There are turtles. Just an amazing place to be with turtles. And you see these beautiful green turtles there. One's kind of snoozing in the coral. Them going up for air quite regularly. But they're just so beautiful, and there's so many of them. They're just really fun to observe and photograph. And now we're gonna switch to Tubataha. And Tubataha was quite different from any of the other places. There are no resorts for you to stay. It's protected reef system, and it's only open during certain times of the year. I think because of typhoons and bad weather. So I was just there in May, and it was just really pristine reefs, just so much fish life and so many different corals, such beautiful soft coral, just wonderful diving. There's also a bird sanctuary in the area that we could see from the boat, but you couldn't go there. So the only way you can actually dive Tubataha is on a liveaboard. And we were there on the Solitude, which was there a week after one of the dive boats actually sank, and there were several divers killed. It was, I think, it was a brand new liveaboard that was, they think, maybe not poorly built. So we were a little worried, but our liveaboard was really pretty old and sturdy and had been through a lot. But the guides that were on our boat were familiar with some of the what had gone on with that particular episode where they lost that one dive boat. So that was a little disturbing when we were there to know that had just happened. But we would do 4 dives a day one early morning, one mid-morning, one kind of after lunch, and then we would do a twilight or a dive at dusk dive. So we wanted to get the perfect light with the sunset. And to get that was we had to push everybody to stay on time with their dives so we could actually get into the water by that time. And that was the biggest struggle we had, was we had kind of some slow pokes on our boat who would hold up the rest of they stay too long on the earlier dives, and then we get back late, and then we miss the golden hour. So our boat was committed, our little boat with 4 people were committed to staying on time and getting out on the water with the golden hour. So we tried to play around with different light, surface light. And here, this is, I found a group of silver sides that were swarming around, and they were right under, the sun was setting and the sky was turning purple. And I just like I didn't lay on my back. I swam on my back with my face up and just shot upward onto the surface to catch. And every time I would shoot and the flash would go off, they'd swarm near to me again. And then, so it was really fun. I spent the whole dive practically diving with these little fish in the purple sky, and just really a lot of fun to play with light and play with formations of schooling fish, working really hard to try to get those beams of light at the sunset. That was like a challenge that we were working on every night. You don't typically do night dives in Tubataha. I'm not sure why they don't do night dives. I know that at the end of a couple of these twilight dives, one time I got, because I was swimming I wasn't really oriented, and I lost my bearings, so I lost my group, and I ended up in another part of the reef that it was starting to get dark, and the sharks came out and were starting to hunt, and there were a lot of them, the little white-tip sharks, but it was quite interesting. We saw whale sharks, and well, actually one whale shark in Tubataha, and this is a juvenile whale shark. It's about as big. It's probably about 7 or 8 feet long, this whale shark. And we saw it on several dives, and it would stay with us for quite a while. It seemed to not really mind being around the divers. And it was really a beautiful little thing. But they have these little parasites on them that they only get them in Tubataha for some reason. And nobody knew why they get them, those little brown things that are on their skin. This is lots of turtles in Tubataha. And this is at the kind of near the golden hour when we're trying to get the lights beams to come in. This is a really beautiful young green turtle who is munching away at coral. There were lots of schooling fish, jacks, barracuda. Almost every dive we saw schooling fish. And often we also saw manta rays. I didn't have a photograph of them. I saw when it was too deep for me to go down. Some other divers saw it later when it was more shallow. But there were lots of barracuda and lots of really beautiful soft corals and small anthias and chromies that were all different colors. Were just everywhere you turned, it was just a really beautiful color and lots to photograph. lots of my favorite. The red whipped coral are my favorites, especially when the polyps are out like this. When we were in Fiji, Paul was actually my roommate and dive buddy. And we had a bad visibility day, and I ended up shooting whipped coral, red whipped coral. And they were images I thought I'd never use again, kind of throwaway things. But I'm a scientist, a physician scientist, and so I also publish papers, research papers, and I study muscle and how muscle cancer in bone affects muscle strength. So we had a paper that was accepted into Nature Medicine about cancer-associated muscle weakness. And I thought that these red whipped corals looked like muscle fibers. So we convinced the editor of Nature Medicine to let us publish the image of red whipped coral on the cover. So I have a big, actually it's in my office behind me, but have the cover of Nature Medicine with a throwaway picture that I probably never would have used for anything. But it was really pretty because it was just the red whipped coral with the polyps out, and it was a macro shot. So I've always had like a favorite place in my heart for red whipped coral, which this one, I mean, it was so pretty. There was nothing interesting around it. Like I usually like to have something come into the picture, like a fish or some other things, but it was so pretty I couldn't resist shooting. And more turtles. This was a hawksbill that was hanging out with us for a while in Tubataha. Again, they were quite friendly. They would come right up to you unfazed. And there weren't a lot of divers. So I think the whole time we were in Tubataha, we really didn't encounter other divers. So they're pretty strict with who's on the sites, dive sites, and you can't have too many divers on a certain site. So we were really lucky in that we really didn't have many other divers except our boat. And this was one of our twilight dives, or our golden hour dives, I guess I should say. And I spent the whole time, because I was just mesmerized by these green chromies. They were so beautiful. I hadn't seen chromies this color before, and there were so many of them. And they were just covering this staghorn coral, which was so healthy. And the coral there is so healthy, and everything is just so pristine. It was just, I could have stayed there for the whole like days on end. It was just so pretty. And I was trying to get the sunbeams coming down as the sun was coming down. And the chromies were just hanging out. There were these green ones everywhere at this one particular site. And I spent my whole diving with these chromies. So that's what I remember about Tubataha. And I think the combination of in macro life in the Philippines, the pelagics with the schooling fish and sharks, everything is, there's just such a wide range of diving possibilities and photographic possibilities. I definitely want to make several trips back to the Philippines to check out the fresher sharks. I'd like to check out the wrecks in the Philippines. Someone recently interviewed David Duboulet and wrote that his favorite place to dive was the Philippines. And if he had to go anywhere in the world to spend like a very long time diving, he would go back to the Philippines because there's so much to do, so diverse. It's actually pretty inexpensive when you compare it to a lot of other Asian diving. So it's just really, I think, fabulous time every time I go. And I never thought I'd be going 3 times to the Philippines, but I'm definitely going to go back again. And I think this is what I put together for you. There are many other pictures that I didn't have time to get everything into this particular slideshow, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Allison Salmon, who you California divers probably know well, and her foundation, Dive into the Pink. They support breast cancer research, and her fundraising has she's been very generous with funding some of the research in my laboratory, to the point where it made a huge difference in our ability to get grants to I study breast cancer and prostate cancers that grow in bone. So she has been a huge help to our lab. And ironically, I got breast cancer, a year ago. So she was a huge support person for me. And now I'm kind of the Houston equivalent of Allison for Dive into the Pink and taking care of the women breast cancer survivors here, helping them here in Houston. So it's a great organization. And Allison is a phenomenal underwater photographer, as you probably know and read. She publishes many articles with Andy, her husband, and they're just great divers, great photographers, great overall human beings. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about anything I showed you or didn't show you, or but I'm really happy to have the opportunity to share some of these images with you tonight.
Thank you, Theresa. That was spectacular. I have gotten to go to the Philippines a couple times now, and that was my first real dive trip, was to Dumaguete. So it's kind of like a little trip down memory lane of seeing all the amazing stuff there that at the time I didn't fully understand, or grasp how incredible it was. I was like, oh, this is spectacular. I get to see all these cool stuff. And then now having done it for 10, 15 years or whatever, you realize, oh, there was so much stuff that was on people's buckets list to see there. And I just happened to get to see it on my first dive trip. So it's that, looking back on it, it set the bar so incredibly high for any diving that I do. And like you were saying with how David was saying that if you could only dive one place ever, for the rest of your life, the Philippines would be it. And it's yeah, it's such an amazingly beautiful place. And there's so many places that I want to go to still in the Philippines as well. I've never done Anilao. That is so high on my list to get to. So
that's an amazing place. And it's just, Anilao Pier is just packed with stuff. And Lembe, you think, Lembe is fabulous too, but you never think but it is really on par with Lembe for many of the creatures that you see.
Absolutely.
Theresa, this is Lisa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I've been to Anilao twice in 2 years. Crystal Blue Resort, right in front of that resort, there's usually 14, 15 boats. That is the most fantastic house reef I've ever seen. They know where the blue rings are. I've seen the scorpion fish down there. It's just packed with stuff. So if you're thinking of Crystal Blue, it's worth it.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you totally. I would have liked to stay at Crystal Blue because of Alex set up this trip with INR Resort, which, it's fine. But the house reef off Crystal Blue is just amazing. I think that site and the Anilao Pier are the two favorite sites to dive in Anilao, and I could just dive those sites all the time. The pygmy seahorses were there at Crystal Blue. The frogfish, all just tons of things, octopus. It was just too busy for like one dive. You'd have to go back, and then there'd be like everybody wants to go to that site. And I heard, I haven't been to Crystal Blue, but I heard that it's really a nice place to stay and that they have really good food. We have to say INR has terrible food. So.
I ate well, and when you go, the only thing I could say is try not to get the top rooms. It's a long hike up. It's almost a disaster.
Yeah, yeah. No, Brooke was with us, and she usually goes to the Crystal Blue. Like she has a photo trip every year at the, Crystal Blue. So she, told us about it. I think she has a trip there next spring. So I'm thinking about going again there. I would definitely go to stay at Crystal Blue next time.
Yeah, the owner of Crystal Blue is a chef from the US, so it doesn't surprise me. I have a question related to the blackwater diving. I've done a little bit of it out of Kona, but I'm kind of curious. This is maybe a science question, not so much a photography question.
Mm-hmm.
How have they linked the juveniles or the larvae to the full-size species? I mean, given we call this a wonderpuss, the one you showed.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look that much like a wonderpuss yet. Are they harvesting these and sequencing the DNA, or are they just making some guesses based on morphological difference? I'm just kind of curious what if you've ever asked that question, or does anybody know?
Well, that's a good question. I wonder that myself, because I think I don't know who is the one to identify them in the first place. They do a lot of blackwater diving in Antelope, especially Crystal Blue. Mike Bartik is like the guru, and Wayne Jones, the Antelope Photo Academy. Like I didn't know what that yellow fish was, and like, oh, that's just a soapfish, but I don't know how they identified I don't think they sequenced the DNA. That would be pretty cool though, because they got all excited when they saw that little wonderpuss, and they're like flashing their lights, and I like go over and they're like screaming in the regulators. The guide's like, woo, and so I take the pictures, and then when we get up there, they'd say it's wonderpuss, and I'm like, well, how do you know? And they said, well, that's how it looked. That's what it looks like. And I don't know how they determine what these things are. I mean, some of the things like, okay, I can tell the mantis shrimp, I can kind of figure that one out. The ghost pipefish, that was kind of, I could figure those out. The little fish, I couldn't. There were some other little things that I have that I don't know what they are. And I didn't have good enough pictures for ID. It was my first time doing this, so I was a little, I need to do more of it to get a little better at shooting those little things.
Oh, I thought it was incredibly difficult. So when I did it off of Kona, so we were all tethered in over 6,000 feet of water, and it was just, it was really kind of everything you saw move, you thought was a shark. It was crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's like you're like, I didn't even realize that the boat is moving. I just totally disoriented, and all I can tell is if I'm going too deep or too, where my depth, just keeping my depth the same, or just going to things. Yeah, I thought it was extremely difficult, especially to photograph those things, little transparent looking specks.
Well, I'm impressed with the shots you got. So.
Thanks.
What was your typical depth on those night dives in the open water?
The deepest I went was like 60 feet. But I tried to stay around 30.
Okay.
Or so. They have like lights on the line, and so I kept trying to keep my eye on one of the lights and make sure I stayed kind of at that depth. But then you'd have the guides kind of flashing their lights somewhere else, and you'd go and see what's over there. The guides are all over the place, and I think they would go all around looking for things. And they're really good at finding them. I found a couple things on my own, but nothing like what they found. But it's I think Alex is doing a whole workshop on blackwater diving in Antelope. I think he's going to be at the Crystal Blue Resort. I think it's sometime this fall, and that would be really cool. But I don't know if I could just do. It's just blackwater diving, so you just be diving at night. I'm not sure. I might get a really bad headache from. I get a really bad headache when I do a lot of macro photography. If I'm really trying to focus on these really tiny things, doing the super macro, sometimes I just need a break. And but I was thinking about trying my wide angle conversion port on a blackwater dive, because it goes up to my lens is 70 millimeters, like, and some of the things were kind of big, like the jellyfish was a little big, but yeah, it's getting oriented. And then I have a 45-degree viewfinder that when there's nothing, no reef or anything to just in open water, it's really hard to get oriented. But it's fun for sure. And I definitely want to do it again. How is Kona blackwater diving?
It was and maybe been doing it there for a while. There's a couple people that really become experts at it, but our success was really, first of all, there's no guides. I think partly because everybody's tethered in. It was there's the boat drifts a bit, but they put a what do you call it, like a anchor, like a sail essentially, right? Some sort of a current anchor. So yeah, because the boat would just be drifting too fast. So you're sort of on your own for whatever drifts by. You can't swim around and find anything or have anything pointed out. So if something drifts by, you don't know, you see it sort of show up in your lights, and you determine whether it's something worth shooting. Oftentimes it's some random worm or something, nothing too interesting. But my wife got a pretty good shot of an octopus as well. I'm not sure she, knows what species it was specifically. Maybe she needs to collect it and grow it to full size.
Yeah.
Whatever the case, it was a good experience. It was just a little hair raising because I know a number of the dives that get canceled because of oceanic white tips showing up.
Oh yeah, you probably wouldn't want that.
So once you hear that story, then everything you see in the corner of your eye, which is usually that sail, that anchor I was describing, is a big sort of moving object that comes into your peripheral vision once in a while, and usually assume it's a shark, and it's very distracting. But yeah, I'd do it again. I think it would take a lot of trips to be good at it, though.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that we had the guides finding things for us was really, really helpful. Because I don't know if I could do it by myself.
Right. I think Mike Bartik probably leads great trips, and I think that'd be fun. He's the one I was describing, was the chef. He came out and was the judge for one of our Monterey shootout / NCUPS contests. We did the beach dive comp. So I stayed with him, and he was a fantastic cook, and he described how he couldn't burn his hands because he had been a chef for so long. So yeah, I imagine he has high standards for his resort. So
yeah, no, that's what I heard. The food is really good, and he's just so enthusiastic and amazing. He's a really good photographer.
He's presented to the shootout a few times, and it's really amazing to see what he's done. So
no, definitely I'm going to go back there next time.
So Theresa, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been really amazing. I mean, thank you. I haven't been to the Philippines yet, but one more vote to get there. So thanks a lot.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
And thanks to NCUPS for organizing.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's really fun to get together with you guys. How was the Antarctic presentation last month?
Very interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to join. Paul told me about it, and I love Antarctica, so I'll have to go and see the recording. But
They did just as much topside as underwater.
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
Really beautiful stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you could go and not even go underwater because I went,
Right.
I dove there and you'd spend 2 hours getting ready to go underwater. And you spend like 45 minutes underwater and you come back and everybody else that didn't, that, the 100 other people that don't go on the dive, they come back and they're like, oh, what did you see? And we're like, we saw sea lions. And like, so did we. But we didn't spend 2 hours getting into all this crap. But
Yeah.
it's so beautiful there. I just love it. I'm gonna go back in a couple of years. But thank you again for inviting me in.
I had a question about the diving. So if you're not doing photography, which is to say, if you're, not interested in, muck diving or
Mhm.
macro or anything, and you just want like good general diving for a non-photographer, can you compare the different places, Anilau, Dumaguete, and Tubahata in terms of quality of diving?
So on the last trip in the Philippines, we had two, they weren't photographers. They were partners of photographers, and
Right.
they loved it. They loved Anilau. Even though it's muck diving, I mean, there's still there's still so many interesting things to see. I mean, they spend all this time watching the octopus, and I mean, there's just a lot of things to see, even if you don't do photography. And they're very good at pointing those out. So I think that I haven't stayed at Crystal Blue Resort, but I heard it's really nice. And the INR it's not the best resort. It's not a great place. I think it's just kind of okay. In Dumaguete, the Atlantis is fabulous. It's like, spa, they have great food, like really just everything is so nice in the resort that if you don't want to dive, but the diving is, it's similar to Anilau, but they're different things, but it's still interesting. But I would say Tubata is probably the best one for people that don't do photography because it's spectacularly beautiful everywhere you dive. And it's just so amazing. I mean, it's not muck diving, it's big, beautiful reefs, colorful fish, schooling fish, whale sharks, manta rays, just really special place to go. But you have to be on a liveaboard. But I think I know the non-photographers really love Tubataha. One of the photographers was trying to get his wife, who doesn't do photography, to do the Blackwater dive, and she's like, I don't think so. It's like, and she asked me if I should. I'm like, no, I wouldn't go if I wasn't doing photography. Like, I'm not, torture myself for looking at these little specks and not knowing what they are, and
right,
like have a nice glass of wine and dinner instead of doing that nighttime.
Do they have good reefs in Dumaguete or Anilau?
There are. Apparently, there is you can go to a reef in Anilau.
Okay.
Because Renee was there. Actually, and also Dumaguete. Well, Dumaguete, you can go to Apple Island. So that's like big reefs and turtles. That's really nice. So, it's like a day trip to go to Apple Island, and you do 3 dives. You can see the whale sharks, lots of turtles. And Renee, she did some nice wide angle photography. She's more of a wide angle shooter. And she did some nice wide angle photography in the Philippines. So there is some, but I think Anilau and Dumaguete are primarily macro, but but I mean, you still see things. Just like I wouldn't do blackwater diving if I was not doing photography.
Yeah,
But I think Tubadaha is just so beautiful all the time. And in Dumaguete, you can go to Apo Island for a day trip, and that's really nice too. As well as the resort is really beautiful there.
okay, thanks.
Sure.
Any more questions, or is that what we've got? If there are no more questions, then thank you again to Theresa. An awesome presentation. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Teresa.
Okay, have a good weekend.
You as
too.
well.
Thanks.
Say hi to Paul.
Thank
I'll probably see,
you.
yeah, Paul next month, but bye-bye.
We'll make sure to
Bye.
say hello.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks for presenting.
Mhm.